What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin, John.
And we have an album review for you. And, well, we got a new supergroup to go over. And those are generally kind of fun because we get to talk about a whole bunch of musicians we like in one band. And this one's been popping up recently just because this band actually just formed last year. So, naturally, we wanted to go over it because, again, it's a supergroup. It's got a lot of people in it we like. And we were kind of curious what it would sound like. So we're going to go over the debut album from Category 7 with their album Category 7. This comes out on the 26th of July on Metal Blade Records. This band, again, formed in 2023 in the U.S. because a lot of these guys are from different parts of the U.S. This is, of course, their debut album. And this band essentially formed because a lot of the members, they were kind of doing that whole Metal Alliance project, and they ended up hanging out, you know, jamming together, stuff that just happens organically, and then they decided, hey, you know what? Let's start a band. So this band actually features a lot of big names. On vocals, we have John Bush, Armored Saint, formerly of Anthrax. Honestly, one of my favorite singers in terms of metal across the board. Phil DeMel, formerly of Violence, actually recently formerly of Violence, and formerly of Machine Head on guitars, as well as Mike Orlando from Adrenaline Mob, also on guitars, and the one that did the production on here. We have Jack Gibson of Exodus on bass, and on drums we have Jason Bittner of Overkill and Shadows Fall. That right there was enough of a lineup to have me intrigued, and stylistically, I mean, all right, it's kind of like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Like, it's maybe not thrashy enough to be fully considered thrash metal, but it's also too heavy and too rowdy to be just like classic heavy metal, and maybe not quite groovy enough or just entirely groove-laden enough to be groove metal. So I would just say, like, it's kind of, I don't know, like in between all those with a bunch of killer guys coming out and just kind of jamming.
Yeah, I had no idea this project actually existed until Nick said, hey, you want to review this? And I said, who's in it? And then he told me who was in it. And I said, okay. I mean, I was a big Shadows Fall fan. I was a big Machine Head fan, a big Exodus fan. So, like, right there, I was like, yeah, man, I'm pretty much sold. And, yeah, it sounds like all these dudes jamming together.
Yeah.
It sounds actually kind of like what you think it would sound like.
Yeah, I mean, baseline, you could say it's kind of an amalgamation of all the bands that these guys are in. You have, you know, the more classic heavy metal moments that you would hear in Armored Saint, and the fact that John Bush is John Bush and sounds like John Bush. Naturally, the first thing I think of is Armored Saint, and, you know, a little bit of the Anthrax stuff. There's a lot of thrashy energy on there, definitely callbacks to Exodus and Overkill, and there's just some flat-out kind of groovy, beefy chugs that show up on here, too, which kind of sits in that Shadows Fall, and, you know, a little bit of Machine Head in there, too. So, yeah, it's kind of a blend of all those things, and I gotta say, like, you know, for a bunch of old pros, like, the energy on here is quite palpable. In fact, this album really doesn't take many breaks.
No filler, no, bullshit as far as samples are concerned. Doesn't really slow down. It's pretty much pedal to the metal at all times. Prime examples of that are the lead-off song, In Stitches, gallopy, thrashy, pedal to the metal. The song Mousetrap, where Jason Bittner just, flat out kills it on the drums. First of all, Bittner's been a great drummer anyway. I have no qualms with that man, never have. Runaway Truck, another just flat out banger. Again, these guys don't stop, and it's like they're on a runaway truck.
Yeah, kind of a no-breaks run of an album. In fact, I was kind of surprised that it only really slows down like a few times in terms of like some more groovy numbers on here. Exhausted and Through Pink Eyes might be two of the slower numbers, but I mean, it's more of like a mid-tempo slow, so it kind of just slows down to a stomping rhythm. All the songs are driven by like just relentless chugging riffs, like lots of stuff that is, again, like both thrash metal oriented, but also like a lot of classic heavy metal. There's even like some, you know, kind of like southern groove to some of the riffs too. And even a couple of like punkier moments, like the whole thrashy bridge on Apple of Discord. There's some like flat out just like kind of crossover thrash riffs. But in terms of like the drum patterns, like a lot of it is just fast D beats. And I would say like Jason really kind of drives this album in terms of the intensity, just because he's, again, a hell of a drummer. But I think all those years in Overkill, man, he's just, you know, double time, lots of D beats, lots of just clever and aggressive fills.
Hey, Jason, slow down. What was that? Faster? Yes. And yeah, Very clever fills. The opening of Mousetrap, actually, there's this crazy isolated drum solo. Really, you could call it a Bentner solo record at that point. Just a bunch of crazy fills, and like it seems like he gets progressively faster. Even when the music slows in that song, he's like, nope, off to the races, we're good. Slow, I don't know what the meaning of that word is.
And there's a couple of songs in here that kind of, get a little bit more towards like the more heavy metal side. Apple of Discord is definitely one of them. And White Flags and Bayonets, it kind of is a little bit more like vocally driven on that one. Like the riffs, I wouldn't say are calmer, but they are less busy, and that's kind of where John Bush takes the driver's seat. And in terms of driver's seats, I think it's kind of John Bush and Jason Bittner kind of like switching off and on, like, don't worry, I got this leg of the journey, Jason, take a break, you've been drumming hard. And John Bush, he's kind of an ageless wonder when it comes down to his vocals. Like, he still sounds just as good as he did 30, almost 40 years ago. He still hits like some really solid highs. Like, he's really not trying to push his range that far, but his vocals are still commanding. They're powerful.
Yeah.
He has such a distinct sound. And I love the fact that his gruffness is still very much intact. Like, not everything is too clean and too pristine with John Bush. Everything kind of has like a little bit of grit to it. Especially on Runaway Truck, like he sounds notably more aggressive on there. He even throws in a couple of fucks for good measure. It's like, yeah, you tell him, John. Now, with any supergroup, I always think about the tropes of supergroups. That whole, some of the parts do not necessarily equal the whole thing. And that's kind of always in the back of my mind when it comes down to supergroups. Because, I mean, if you look at the history of supergroups, there's definitely a lot of good ones. Bloodbath comes to mind right out of the gate. But there's a lot that just kind of fall by the wayside just because, again, like, yeah, you have a collection of insanely talented musicians, but they don't always gel. And some of it might be due to the fact that, you have a lot of like alphas, a lot of leaders in there too. I don't know if that's necessarily the case in here, but this definitely has a lot of good points in terms of like, all right, this is straightforward, just again, kind of like that sweet spot between like thrash metal, groove metal, and heavy metal. And the songs are just, driven by hooks, riffs. It's not entirely that flashy in some respects, and then in other respects, it's very flashy. In fact, maybe a couple of moments that are too flashy.
I mean, yeah, the drums are fantastic. No qualms in that department. The guitar work is solid. The lead work is incredible. Both these guys are very prone to harmonic leads, harmonic twin leads, tapping, all sorts of willy-woos and squeals and whatnot.
Trades everywhere.
Yep, yeah. Very entertaining. Of course, John Bush is John Bush, and he does a great job. And so, like, individually, they're all firing on all cylinders individually.
Yeah, if we were to like rate each individual performance on here, I mean, it would all be like very positive. Like, they're all still like masters of the craft. I do love the lead play in here. I do think it is maybe a little too frequent. Like, dude, they find like any space there to squeeze in a quick run of notes and some squealies. And, it's fun. Like, the whole spirit of this album, it feels like a fun jam session. Like, yeah, man, we've been, like, touring together for years and hanging out backstage. Like, dude, we should do a band. And that was, like, years ago. And then we meet up again. It's like, dude, we should do a band. Like, yeah, no, we'll get around to that when we're not in 8 different bands. And they kind of found that moment. And, like, you kind of get that energy where they're just kind of just playing for the fun of it. And I like that. That's always something really cool. But again, that whole argument about the sum of the parts does not equal the whole. I do get that in spots here where it feels like, certain aspects kind of want to take over a song, and then other aspects that kind of just reel them back a little bit. Like, I feel like there's like a lot of just trying to stay in a lane, maybe venturing out a little bit, and then immediately pulling back just because, like, no, that's too overkill, or too excess, or that's too armored saint.
It's kind of like they were stuck behind a semi-truck on the expressway, and you go to look around him, and oh shit, there's somebody in that lane, so you veer back, and you go to get around him the other way, and you're like, man, that's too slow. So they're just kind of like stuck there.
Or if you're on a highway with way more lanes, it's like being stuck behind a semi-truck, only to change lanes and get, away from it, and then to be stuck right behind another fucking semi-truck.
Like, you ever seen the beginning of Office Space? It's that.
Yep. So the end result, to me, is kind of a homogenized blend of all these bands. And again, like, it's very energetic. It's, kind of a lot of fun. Like, all these songs kind of just, like, jump out at you with, like, big lead-ins. They're rowdy. They're pissed off. And generally, again, the pace of this is very fast. But when it comes down to, I would say, like, creativity, It's, I mean, it's kind of just meat and potatoes. And, you know, I really wasn't looking for a tremendous amount of creativity, but I would have welcomed some at some points in here.
Because a lot of the songs have the same vibe. In fact, all of them, with the exclusion of the last track, which we'll get to here in a second, all of them just kind of have the same setup. Like, usually the beginning is where the song, in my opinion, is the strongest. Like, they come out swinging on the beginning of everything, and usually it's Bittner going, you know, 1,000 miles an hour, doing every turnover he can think of right in the very beginning, and the riff is aggressive, and then you're off to the races. But then the song just kind of takes the same path. Just a verse, and then a big chorus, and John Bush sings his ass off. Then they get into some tappy, harmonized, crazy lead, and then the song's over.
Yeah.
And that happens 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, like, they generally say, like, the most energetic part for the bridge. And, I mean, again, it's fun, but after a while, you kind of notice a pattern on here. Like, you do get some, like, slight tonal shifts, like, in terms of, like, a song maybe being more aggressive than some of the other ones, but there's very few moments where it kind of just, like, chills out for a little bit, and it's, you know, like, a little bit more subdued. Like, probably Exhausted might be one of the few moments where, you know, John Bush kind of pulls back, his vocals are a little bit more subdued, there's slightly more atmosphere to the song, but at the same time it's still heavy, chuggy, and, you know, kind of just has like a, you know, kind of mean energy to it. And as I brought up, like, occasionally this album is just like a little too busy in spots, like leads aplenty everywhere, every single song. And again, you have 2 lead guitarists who are both killer. Both Mike and Phil are just crushing on here.
Yep.
But there seems to be an overabundance of leads, and leads that don't necessarily stand out or stand apart from one another. Like, they're all good. They're all like a million notes and lots of, like, really, you know, flavorful runs, but they're all kind of similar because the songs are kind of similar. And then there are moments where, like, just like a little bit less would be more in other departments, like Waver at the Breaking Point. I think the song has some really good elements, namely John Bush's vocals. I think this song is very vocally driven, or at least it would be if Jason Bittner wasn't going ham the entire time. This song, you know, if you break it down to, like, the riffs, the bass line, and the vocals, it feels like it should be a more mid-tempo song.
Yep.
Like, you know, kind of a dirgy, more like, you know, and I wouldn't say ballady, but like something a little bit more slow tempo to mid tempo. But Jason is going nuts on the drums the entire time, and he's entirely too busy on that song. And given how loud the drums are in this mix, and we'll get to that in a bit, it just kind of clutters up the song. It even kind of takes away from, like, you know, the vocal presence. And, you know, I think the guitars kind of, like, get drowned out a bit because he's just doing these constant fills, which are all excellent. Again, he's a badass drummer, but there's just too much in that song.
There is a time, though, for the musicians on this album to really come out and shine, to make everything a little bit more present and a little bit more prevalent, and to show off a little bit. Not that they haven't done so in the record, but a time when they can isolate more of those moments and really come out and play. The last track, Etter Stormin', is an 8-minute instrumental, and actually probably one of the more focused songs on the record, where, again, everyone gets their chance to come out and play.
Well, minus John, because it's instrumental.
Right. It's just a riffy banger of leads and melodies and gallops, and there's a bass and drum groove isolation section that's pretty sweet. Kind of just showcases, again, how talented these dudes are. Again, at least the musicians, not John Bush. I mean, he's talented too.
Oh, yeah.
That's not important. But yeah, that song is killer.
Yeah, I loved it, and almost immediately it reminded me a lot of Megadeth, like Into the Lungs of Hell, Black Male Universe. Like, it kind of has this, you know, like heavy, chuggy groove at first. The leads are coming in, and there's lots of melody all over the place, and some crazy drum transitions in terms of Bittner. Like, there's this cool off-time rhythm that comes in where he's doing like a lot of like that dancing hi-hat thing. And this song is absolutely awesome. And there are a lot of elements I would love to see repeat in a lot of their music going forward, because there's a lot of clever hooks in there. But it's not necessarily structured for vocals, so yeah, I don't think John would have fit on here at all. But overall, like, I liked the possible amount of, like, restraint here in terms of, like, let's just keep the song going and not try to make it too busy. But this album does have some other issues, and probably the biggest one, at least that I think, is the production. The production was handled by Mike Orlando, and in terms of like the levels on here, this album just sounds odd.
First of all, like we said, the drums are very out front, and it's interesting because in the very beginning of this record, when you first hear the drums, I mean, of course, they're loud and in your face, but to me, they sounded fairly compressed, and as the record goes on, it becomes more natural sounding. In fact, by the time you get to the end, it sounds like the drums were mic'd with a 4-track. Like, it's very, very natural. But then beyond that, the guitars, like at least the rhythm section, is fairly thin and very fuzzy. Sounds like they recorded those guitars in front of like static on a TV. Like there's just a sound going behind the guitars all the time, and that's really odd because to me, I would think, especially with the energy and the overall vibe of this album, it's like they desire it to be very thrashy and very in your face, but the guitars just aren't.
Yeah, like, again, they feel like they're a little bit in the back of the mix, and that weird staticky kind of hiss to them. Like, I don't know, like, especially when they're going like faster, the riffs start becoming a little bit, indistinct, especially behind like leads. Again, Jason Bittner's very loud drums, and then John Bush's vocals are very out in front, which, yeah, he's John Bush. He's got huge vocals anyway, but he's like a very dominant sound on here, and his vocals, like the production on them, I think, is a little too dry at times. Like, yeah, they definitely double up his vocals for big choruses and such, but a lot of the time they feel very dry and very compressed. And just a little bit of reverb on his vocals, I think, would help this just a bit, because, I don't know, you kind of want like a little bit of that live feel, like he's singing in an auditorium, and this sounds like he's screaming inside of a phone booth. But yeah, the mix on here really hampered the listen, just because like the entire time I was like, dude, if this was maybe mixed a little bit differently, I think some of these songs would probably pop a little bit more. But there's still, again, the issues of them, again, in one like part like being just a little too ordinary, and then another like just a little too busy, but like busy doing kind of ordinary things. And, personal preference, this is just me nitpicking, I don't like the album cover at all. It looks like the soundtrack to a made-for-TV or direct-to-the Walmart dollar bin disaster movie, which probably starred both Steven Seagal and Kevin Sorbo. So you didn't even get your dollar's worth, in my opinion, there. The album cover does not really capture heavy metal band. It captures Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on TBS. Made for the whole family. You can all be disappointed together. But overall, I do find this pretty enjoyable, just for the fact like it's a lot of like just absolutely killer musicians hanging out, jamming. You do get that vibe, and granted, if you gave me the option of listening to this versus all the bands they're in, I would probably go to all the bands they're in. This still isn't too bad. So overall, I'm going to give it 3 stars. It's a good album. There's still plenty of raucous riffs on here. The drum performance is awesome. John Bush kills it, just like John Bush has killed it on every album he's ever been on. It's just sort of a fun listen. It's just kind of missing, like a little bit of extra flash in terms of like songwriting, because it's very on the nose. And then the moments where it kind of tries to get off of those rails, it doesn't necessarily work as well. Love the instrumental. The instrumental absolutely whoops ass. And Through Pink Eyes, even though it's just sort of an odd song title, like just Wash Your Pillow or something. But yeah, that song is absolutely awesome. Like, good chugging riffs, good stomping energy. I would just like a little bit more variety. Maybe when they decide to do another one. I can't imagine this being a one-off, because, I mean, this does sound like it was a lot of fun to make. But yeah, if you're a big fan of literally all the bands that these guys are in, especially Overkill and Exodus, like, I get a lot of that energy in particular, but also like some good Armored Saint hooky melodies and such, and even like some, 90s Anthrax with John Bush, a little bit of that. Check this out, give it a whirl. It's pretty decent.
I'm pretty much in the same boat, although I'm going to give it a 2.5. These guys are all excellent musicians. I can't take away from that. Like, individually, they're all bringing it, and that's really cool. I don't think necessarily at times it landed the way it was supposed to in all these songs. Some of the transitions don't quite mesh real well, and to be honest, even though they're all peak performers in their game, it just didn't feel like it meshed most times. There's probably like 3 or 4 songs out of 10 that I really enjoyed. Runaway Truck is a great time, very aggressive. Mousetrap, that's I think where Bittner really comes out and shines and doesn't take away from the rest of the song. Through Pink Eyes, again, strange song title, but I think one of the more focused tracks on this record. Like, it seems like they hit all the dynamics that they wanted to hit, all the changes that they made in the transitions, that like they weren't goofy transitions, everything landed well, and even production-wise, it sounded just a pinch better. And then, of course, the last track, the monster instrumental, yeah, great time, great guys, great musicians. It just didn't land well for me as a whole. Overall, like Nick said, if you like all the bands these guys are in, you're probably going to dig this. Furthermore, probably, a little bit of Judas Priest. There's definitely some Iron Maiden in there with the harmonies for sure. So, like, if you like all that music and, again, all the bands that these guys are in, just check this out. Give it a whirl for yourself. See what you think. Maybe the production isn't as hampered as we think. Maybe we're just two old fuddy-duddies with bad ears. Who knows?
What?
So yeah, give it a whirl for yourself. Check it out for sure.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And as always, tons of stuff coming from Thralls of Metal. Still, tons of album reviews, discography rankings. We will get to Meshuggah, I promise you. It'll happen.
We have a date.
We have a date, again. States of metal, is it metal, is it not metal? We're going to start more topical discussions, too. I don't know if you guys watched the one we did recently on Metal Archives, but I think we're going to start rolling with stuff like that in the future. Just give everybody a little bit more to talk about, and it's not just us reviewing an album, so that should be cool. Anyway, all this stuff we do here at Thralls of Metal, we do all because of you guys. We genuinely appreciate all of our friends, our family, our subscribers, everybody that helps make Thralls of Metal more than just a YouTube channel. We appreciate you. It's been awesome talking to all of you on live streams and meeting up at shows. Please come up and say hello. We enjoy talking to all of our fans, so yeah. It's been a real ride. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys rule, and yeah, tons of stuff coming your way. So one more big thank you, because you guys do in fact rule, because I said so. And we will catch you later.